The Medicaid was clean in a way that hurt. Not the warmth of clean, not the comfort of it, but the aggressive, antiseptic, institutional clean of a place designed to make you forget that you had a body until that body required attention. White surfaces, bright light, the smell of chemical agents and recycled air, and the faint metallic tang of instruments that had been sterilized so many times they had begun to lose their edges. Damien had never been in a place like this. He had never been in any place like this. His entire medical history consisted of his mother pressing her blind fingers to his forehead and saying, "You feel warm, drink water." And then later, "You feel less warm, good." And then later still, nothing at all. Because she had been dead, and there had been no one to press fingers to his forehead, and no one to say, "Drink water," and no one to notice whether he felt warm or less warm or not warm at all. He sat on the examination table and swung his legs because his legs did not reach the floor, because the table was designed for adults and for space marines and for bodies much larger than his. And the swinging was a comfort, a small rhythmic thing that kept the enormity of the room at bay. He was still talking. He had been talking since Konrad had carried him through the corridors, since the Medicaid had saluted and asked what he could do, since Konrad had deposited him on the table with the particular carelessness of a man, setting down a package he had been carrying too far, and the talking had not stopped, would not stop, could not stop, because talking was what you did when you were in a room with the Night Haunter, because talking was what you did when the Night Haunter was standing right there, arms crossed, talon fingers tapping against his bicep, dark eyes watching, and if you stopped talking, then maybe he would leave, and if he left, then this was a dream, and if this was a dream, then Damien would wake up in his alley behind the moisture collector with 2 bars and a rust-colored sky and no Night Haunter, and he did not want to wake up, not yet, not now, not when the Night Haunter was right there, real, solid, watching him with those void, dark eyes. So he talked about his mother. He talked about how she had been really nice and pretty, how she had had long brown hair, how her eyes had not been working at all, how she had been completely blind, actually completely blind, so they had been and how she had been a bit darker than him and Konrad, but that was not really hard to do since they were both really pale, and how she had said it was important for him to eat because she had said his metabolism was going to be really high for someone like him, which he did not really understand why. It was just kind of always like this. And then he said, "Oh wait, my mom?" And then he talked about how his mom had come from off planet years ago, how she had said she had been on this planet that was under something, and the words tumbled out of him with the force and coherence of a river that has broken through a dam. No punctuation, no pause, no breath, just words. Words pouring out of him in a torrent that should have been impossible for lungs that small and a body that thin. He talked about his health. He talked about how he was really, really skinny, but he swore he could never get enough food. How he was just always so hungry all the time, even after he ate a meal that other kids ate. How he was not trying to be a pig. He just could not help it. He guessed it was just another thing that made him different from other kids, since they were not as fast as he was, or as nimble, or... Wait, was he bragging? Was bragging a bad thing? He did not mean to brag. He was just kind of stating the truth, since you know he had to be honest all the time since that was really important. Even his mom had told him that before she died 2 years ago. He talked about how he was healthy, how he never got sick once, how he just kind of kept going and going and going and going. How one time he had been able to stay up for like a week without sleep, and he had barely cared. It had only taken him until it was 2 weeks where he had finally had to fall asleep. It had been wild. But he had been up and about again in the morning after a full night's rest, and he had been fine, like those 2. Weeks had not even happened, and could Konrad do that? Or was he just weird, and was it just him, and he hoped he was not a mutant? Because that would be bad since he knew mutants were not tolerated. He had heard about that from a pamphlet someone had been handing out in the market. He talked about the Night Haunter. He talked about the posters, about the slogan, about how he had decided that he was going to be just like him. Well, not with the killing part. He thought blood was kinda icky, really. But still, the sneaking, the shadows, the justice, the being a hero, the being the thing that people in the dark looked up to and felt safe because of. And he talked about how cool Konrad was, how amazing, how incredible, how the way he moved. Through the shadows was just the most beautiful thing Damien had ever seen, even though he'd only seen it for about 4 seconds before being grabbed by the back of his tunic and lifted into the air. But those 4 seconds had been enough, had been more than enough, had been everything. In the room outside of time, Magnus spoke with the weary resignation of a man watching his own worst quality reflected back at him in a smaller, thinner, hungrier package. "I know I talk a lot," he said, "but this is ridiculous." And Leman, who had been laughing since the boy had started talking and had not stopped laughing and showed no signs of stopping, managed to wheeze out from wherever he had ended up on the floor, "Almost like you." And the laughter redoubled, and Magnus said, "I do not just spew you out verbal." "Daria," without pausing, and Horus said, Brother, you do, actually." And the room dissolved into the particular chaos of a family watching one of its members be confronted with the living embodiment of his most exasperating trait, except this one was 9 years old and had not eaten in 2 days and was currently sitting on a Medicaid table talking at the night. Haunter with the relentless, unstoppable force of a child who has been alone for a very long time and has just found someone to talk to. Konrad, in the viewing room, said nothing. He could not say anything. Saying anything would mean acknowledging that the boy on the screen was talking too much. And acknowledging that the boy was talking too much would mean acknowledging that the boy reminded him of Magnus. And acknowledging that the boy reminded him of Magnus would mean acknowledging that the boy was his. Because only his could be that exhausting, that relentless, that fundamentally incapable of silence. And he was not acknowledging anything, was not admitting anything, was simply irritated, simply inconvenienced, simply watching a phenomenon he did not care about, with the detached academic interest of a man observing a species he had no intention of studying. The Medicaid worked. He worked with the quiet efficiency of a man who had seen too many bodies and too many wounds and too many children who should not have been in the state they were in, and he coaxed Damien's rags off, layer by layer, gently, patiently, the way one peels the wrapping from something fragile. And the boy kept talking through all of it, kept chattering, kept pouring words into the clean white air of the Medicaid like water into a vessel that was already overflowing. And the Medicaid did not tell him to stop, did not ask him to be quiet, did not do anything except work, because the talking was clearly a defense mechanism, clearly a wall the boy had built between himself and the world, and taking it away would be cruel, and cruelty was not something the Medicaid dealt in. And then the rags were off, and the body was revealed. It was dirty. It was extremely malnourished. Both the Medicaid and Konrad could easily count each of the child's ribs, could trace the architecture of them beneath skin stretched too tight, could see the sharp protrusion of collarbones, the knobs of spine, the knobs of hip, the way the limbs were more bone than muscle, more structure than substance, the way the body had been starved not for days but for years, had been slowly, methodically, relentlessly emptied of everything that made a body rather than a framework. And the big dumb grin was still on the boy's face. Still there, still constant, still burning with the particular uncomplicated joy of a child who has just met his hero. And the grin was the cruelest thing about it, because it meant the boy did not know, did not see, did not understand that his body was a testament to a suffering so prolonged and so total that it had become invisible to him, the way a fish does not see the water. The Medicaid's face changed, pity deepened, the professionalism tightened. He reached for his instruments. Konrad's jaw tightened. He said nothing. He stood there, arms crossed, taloned fingers tapping, and he watched the Medicaid work, and he did not leave. And the not leaving was its own kind of speaking, its own kind of admission, its own kind of thing that he would never acknowledge, never name, never allow himself to feel, because feeling it would mean caring, and caring would mean the boy was his, and the boy was not his. The boy was a rat, a stray, a disruption to the security system, a nothing that would be dealt with and forgotten. The Medicae opened his carrying case and took out a hypodermic attached to some sort of screen, and he said, "Slight pinch," and he hit a vein on Damien's arm, and it was not hard to hit because the veins were right there beneath the skin, visible and prominent in the way that veins are visible and prominent in a body that has no fat, no muscle, no padding, no anything between the skin and the architecture beneath. And the boy looked at the needle in his arm and said, "What? Did you do something?" Because he had not felt it, because his body was so accustomed to pain, so accustomed to hunger, so accustomed to the slow grinding ache of not enough, that a needle in his arm was nothing, was less than nothing, was a sensation so minor it did not even register. The device pinged, not after a minute, not after two, not after the usual waiting period that accompanied blood tests and genetic scans and the slow patient work of machines analyzing samples. It pinged immediately. The screen went green before the Medicae had even finished withdrawing the needle, before the drop of blood had fully settled into the analysis chamber, before the machine had had time to do what machines were supposed to do, which was take their time, be thorough, be careful, be slow. The Medicae stared at the screen, his mouth open, closed, opened again. "What?" he said. Not a question, not an exclamation, a sound that a man makes when the thing he is looking at is so fundamentally incompatible with his understanding of the world that his brain simply stops processing and his mouth opens and a sound comes out that is not a word, is not a thought, is simply the noise of a mind encountering something it cannot categorize. Konrad, who had been standing with his arms crossed and his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on the middle distance, turned, looked at the Medicae, looked at the screen. "What now?" he asked, and his voice carried the particular exhaustion of a man seriously contemplating just walking out, just turning around and walking out of the Medicae and out of the fortress and out of the situation and out of the universe. Because whatever was on that screen was going to be a problem, was going to be a complication, was going to be a thing that required him to feel something, and he was very, very tired of feeling things. The Medicae swallowed. "My lord," he said, his voice thin, uncertain, the voice of a man who has just seen something he wishes he had not seen. "I think I need to do a second teasty." And Konrad, who had been patient, who had been still, who had been standing there with his arms crossed and his jaw tight for longer than he cared to admit, moved. He shoved the Medicae aside, not gently, not cruelly, but with the particular impatience of a man who has been waiting for an answer and is now going to get it himself. And he looked at the screen, and what he saw truly stunned him for the first time in millennia. The numbers glowed on the screen in the clean white light of the Medicae, green and steady and absolute, and they said, chances of gene seed rejection, 0%. Chances of Astartes organ acceptance, 99.87%. Chances of augmentation success, 97.35%. Genetic makeup match, 100%. The numbers sat on the screen. They did not blink. They did not flicker. They did not offer caveats or conditions or possibilities for error. They simply were. They simply existed. They simply stated, with the cold mechanical certainty of a machine that does not care about feelings or implications or the emotional state of the being reading them, that the boy on the table, the small thin boy with the big dumb grin and the endless words and the bleeding fingers and the empty stomach, was a genetic match. 100%. Not 99, not 98, 100. A perfect match. A match that could only mean one thing. Konrad stared at the screen. He stared at it the way a man stares at a wound he has been ignoring for a very long time. The way a man stares at a letter he has been refusing to open. The way a man stares at a truth that has been standing in front of him for the entirety of the conversation, and that he has been looking at without seeing, because seeing it would mean admitting it, and admitting it would mean feeling it, and feeling it would mean everything he had built, everything he had constructed, every wall and every silence and every carefully maintained architecture of indifference would come down. He stared at the screen. He did not speak. In the room, outside of time, the silence was absolute, not the silence of shock, not the silence of horror, but the silence of a group of beings who have been waiting for a moment. They knew was coming and who are now finally in it, and who do not know what to do with their hands or their eyes or their voices, because the moment is too large for any of those things. Slowly, as one, the family turned to look at Konrad, turned to look at a somehow even paler Konrad, because Konrad was already pale, was always pale, had been pale for millennia, but this was a different pale, a deeper pale, the pale of a man whose blood has retreated somewhere inside him and left the surface empty. And they looked at him. They did not speak, because speaking would mean saying the thing, and saying the thing would mean making it real, and making it real would mean Konrad would have to respond, and they were not sure, any of them, that they wanted to see what happened when Konrad Curze was forced to respond to the fact that he was a father. Horus broke the silence. He broke it the way Horus broke all silences, with the particular gentle authority of a man who has decided that the silence has gone on long enough, and that someone must speak, and that someone might as well be him. And he turned to Konrad with a look on his face that was smug, that was warm, that was full of the particular satisfaction of a brother who has been waiting for this moment and is now, finally, going to enjoy it. "So," he said, "you wanted proof." Konrad said, "Shut." Horus said, "Why?" "We had to wait for proof to come up, and now here it is. Congratulations, you are a father." And Konrad said, "I will fucking murder you." And the words came out flat and cold and carrying the particular exhaustion of a man who has just been handed a truth he has spent the entirety of the conversation denying. And the denial was still there, still intact, still functioning, but it was thinner now, more transparent, more like a sheet of glass than a wall of stone. And behind it, visible if you look closely, was something else. Something that was not anger, was not irritation, was not inconvenience, but was something smaller and more frightened and more tender than anything Konrad Curze had allowed himself to feel in several thousand years. On the screen, the boy was still talking. He had not noticed the numbers. He had not noticed the medicated shock, or Konrad's stillness, or the way the air in the room had changed, had thickened, had become something almost physical, almost solid, a thing you could press your hand against and feel the resistance of. He was still talking, still chattering, still pouring words into the clean white air with the relentless, unstoppable force of a child who has been alone for a very long time and has just found someone to talk to. And the talking was not about the test, was not about the numbers, was not about the implications of a 100% genetic match, but about his mother, about the market, about the posters, about the Night Haunter, about how cool the Night Haunter was, about how amazing, about how incredible, about how he had always wanted to be just like him. Well, not with the killing part, and the words kept coming, kept flowing, kept pouring out of him like water from a broken vessel. And Konrad stood there and listened, or did not listen, or told himself he was not listening, which was not the same thing, but was close enough. The Medici, recovering, began his work again. He began the second Tiste, and the third, and the fourth, and each time the device pinged, immediately, instantly, before the blood had even settled, and each time the screen went green, and each time the numbers were the same, 0% rejection, 99.87% acceptance, 97.35% augmentation, 100% match, and the numbers did not change, did not waver, did not offer any mercy, any ambiguity, any space for denial. And Konrad stood there and watched the numbers be the same every time, And the sameness was worse than any single result could have been, because a single result could be an error, could be a malfunction, could be a fluke. But the same result 4 times in a row was not a fluke, was not an error, was not a malfunction, was a fact, was a truth, was a thing that existed in the world and could not be unmade. And then the Medicaid turned the boy around to check his spine, and the boy turned back, and he looked at Konrad, and the look was the same as before, the same as it had been in the corridor, the same as it had been when Konrad had carried him through the fortress. The same look of complete, uncomplicated, absolute trust. The look of a child who has decided that the person in front of him is good, is safe, is his, and the decision is made and final and not open to revision. And the boy looked at Konrad Curze with those dark eyes that matched the Night Haunter's own. Dark eyes that the test had just confirmed were a 100% genetic match. And the boy smiled, open and unguarded and full of a hope so raw and so desperate and so fundamental that it was almost painful to witness. And he said, "Wait, you will stay." And his voice went up at the end, not quite a question, not quite a statement, but something in between, something that meant please, something that meant don't leave, something that meant I have been alone for 2 years, and I don't want to be alone anymore. And Konrad looked at him for a long time, at him with those void dark eyes that had seen millennia of fear and pain and the particular architecture of suffering. And those eyes found the boy's eyes, found those dark matching eyes, found that open, unguarded grin, found that small thin body on the examination table with its visible ribs and its bleeding fingers and its empty stomach, and something in those void dark eyes shifted, changed, moved, a tectonic thing, a deep thing, a thing that happened so far beneath the surface that it was almost invisible, almost undetectable. But it was there, it was real, it was happening, and Konrad Curze felt it, and he did not know what it was, and he did not want to know what it was, and he said nothing. He said nothing, and the saying of nothing was the loudest thing he had ever said.